My husband refuses to eat leftovers, although he has many other redeeming qualities. I'll often eat them until I get sick of them. And we do have some voracious cats, but they will not eat salad. I don't think about this every day, but there are times where it becomes more poignant in my mind than others. For instance, when I think about the homeless population or the large number of food insecure people in our country, in our city. At a time around the holidays, there's also lots of food drives that put this into your mind. I think we all know in our heart of hearts that food waste is bad, but I wanted to remind myself a little bit more about why that was. So the USDA estimates that 30 to 40% of the food we grow each year is not eaten. That is a huge number, 30 to 40%. That amounts to $150 billion annually in waste, let alone the environmental consequences. The US is particularly bad. We're actually the worst in the world when it comes to wasting food, just barely ahead of Europe. And unfortunately, this is getting worse. So if we look at EPA data on food waste over time, since the 80s, we've been steadily increasing our waste production, particularly of food waste. The landfill proportion of food is getting larger, and that contributes to methane production and other things. So it is a problem. What do we know about food waste reduction? Well, the EPA has a pyramid for that. It's kind of interesting. I'll pass this around. So source reduction is at the top of their hierarchy, most preferred method to address the problem, followed by feeding hungry people, feeding animals, industrial uses, composting, and landfill, least preferred. So many facets. I'm only going to speak briefly today about the first one, but I do hope to address some of the other pieces of the triangle in later speeches. We can also learn about food waste reduction through surveys. There's a lot of government data out there. There's also some nonprofit studies that have been done recently, for instance, from the NRDC. They did a large study in New York, Nashville, and Denver recently. They asked participants to weigh the amount of waste that they produced over a week, categorize it, and to control for people that weren't quite spot on. They did waste bin digs. So they went in and sorted people's trash as a small percentage of the participants. So the survey, this was interesting to me because the survey found that about 2.5 pounds per person per week were wasted. And that's a little bit higher than some of the previous averages of 1 to 2 pounds per person from, for instance, the USDA. So this gives us some clues. And what did the survey tell us about the types of waste? So coffee, these are the top wastes among all 3 cities they surveyed. Coffee, apples, milk, bread, bananas, and chicken. The reasons for waste, 44%, this makes sense, inedible. 20%, and by inedible, that means traditionally inedible, like a banana peel or actually coffee grounds. So not necessarily just the apple core that you might still eat. 44% inedible, 20% moldy or spoiled, 16% questionable, and 15% did not want to eat it, it was too little, or they didn't want it as leftovers. Also, the study found that barely over half of the participants actually made shopping lists when they went to the grocery store, and those who did more meal planning had less waste. So what can these data points maybe suggest to us? At the store, meal planning seems to be something that we can work on doing better. All of these are really simple concepts, but meal planning is one this points to strongly. We all know what happens when we go to the store hungry, or when we see the dozen bagels on sale for 50 cents. So last year, my husband and I also started playing around with these meal kit deliveries. I don't know if you guys have tried like Blue Apron, that type of thing. It's fun. We cook more together and we learn new recipes, and then we get the exact amount of food we need with no extra proportions. So I think that's a cool idea, and even the packaging is usually recyclable. At our homes, aside from meal planning, I'm not going to suggest that we try to be better about eating our leftovers. It's probably impractical, but we can get creative about our food a little bit. Everyone knows that it's nice to make a broth with your leftover veggies, and even if you don't want to do it now, we can start a bag, put it in the freezer, and add to it. Or those of us who are gardeners can, benefit from eggshells and coffee waste in the garden. I'm also just going to pass around a few perhaps non-traditional ideas that might appeal to you for some recipes with the commonly wasted foods from the NRDC survey. It's not easy to change our food habits, but it's important to remember too that when we waste food, we're wasting water, energy, agricultural chemicals, labor, and lots of other resources. So my suggestion is really just that we start thinking about it, considering it here and there. The NRDC survey found that close to 80% of the survey participants thought that they threw out less than the average person. The EPA and USDA teamed up a few years ago to create a challenge of reducing the food waste to 15% over the next 15 years. So very cool. I hope that we hear an update on that progress. Food for thought. Thank you.